So if I can have you come back, I think all of you hung your posters up. This time, instead of sharing how your experience went, because the last time we just shared how it went, it was a little therapy session on essential questions. Now we are going to share what we actually created. So I'm going to have each group share their question and maybe just a little bit about maybe the grade level it was expected for, and anything else that you'd like to share. So let's just go in order. Who has the kindergarten table? Oh, thank you. Would you be willing to read your questions to us?
One question we asked, how does sunlight
Will you tell us the question?
The standard. They're curious.
make observations to determine the effect of sunlight on Earth's surface? One question said, or asked, how does sunlight affect Earth's surface? What would happen if there was no sunlight? Why are the days longer in certain seasons? Why are days getting colder?
Okay, thank you. All right, how about another group? Oh, we're going in order. First grade. Oh, okay.
Ours is on this door here. We have first grade, and the standard is plan and conduct investigations to provide evidence that vibrating materials can make sound and that sound can make materials vibrate. So one of our questions was, how do we hear noise? And then our other question was, how does sound affect movement? But I think our biggest aha moment was having all of us together to create these questions. So that collaborative piece is, I think, very important.
Thank you. Second grade?
Our standard was construct an argument with evidence that some changes caused by heating or cooling can be reversed and some cannot. And our question is up front. I wrote it in a highlighter. I apologize. It was, how does heating and cooling affect different objects?
Thank you. And third grade?
Our standard was construct an argument that some animals form groups that help members survive. And then our question was, what are the benefits of living in a community?
Okay, thank you. How about the last, or 4? I guess we have 4 and 5 left.
We had identify evidence from patterns in rock formations and fossils and rock layers to support an explanation for changes in landscape over time. So we kind of did the big umbrella and did how does time create change? And then we took a social studies science perspective. So we did how do layers of the earth show change over time? And how does land changing over time affect people?
Thank you. And 5th grade?
Our standard, use models to describe that energy in animals' food used for body repair, growth, motion, and to maintain body warmth was once energy from the sun. And our question, what role does the sun play in providing nutritional health and growth?
Okay, thank you. One thing that keeps coming up through many groups when I'm visiting is that there's a lot of questions about how narrowed in do I make this question? And so I know Mark mentioned it earlier, and then we keep kind of getting back to that idea is that like I said, there could be questions that are essential that go over years. You could have one just for the year of your class. You could have one for your unit. So many of these, once again, since they are at the standard level, probably are going to be more of those narrowed in questions. But you can also write those overarching questions. So when I came to this group over here, they had the 3 wonderful questions, and they were trying to determine which one really is the biggest question, and then the other ones still are very engaging to students, and those are more of like a unit type question. So they're just like with our students, when we're creating questions, there's no, you have to know what the scope is that you're trying to get at when you write your question. Yes, thank you.
Question for Mike. I know that we're probably all going to go back to our buildings to try and share this information with our staff. It would be helpful if we could get like that little format right there. What was the question and the grade levels on it, and then what were the big questions we came up with? Because I think that would generate some ideas for staff. We can do an exercise very similar to this with the science standard, go through grade level, and that might get everybody ready then to move on to something else.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. Anything else that you thought from this activity? Any new thoughts about writing essential questions? Okay. I do have a few other ways that you could go about writing essential questions. We're going to just talk about this one, though. I did have an activity, and I'll share the activity with you in case you did want to take it back to your building. One thing is, especially with math and science, is misconceptions, and really looking at what are the common misconceptions that students have, and then think about writing questions that are aimed directly towards those misconceptions so that students confront them in your classrooms. I'm sure that if you've been teaching a subject for a content area for about 5 years, you know what the students stumble on repeatedly and where things seem to go wrong with light, then that would be a way that you could write questions. So the green paper is just a sampling of misconceptions, and if you were doing this, it'd be very similar, is that take those misconceptions and then think about what questions that you could write based off of common student misconceptions. And just so you know where I found these is I went online and I Googled elementary science misconceptions. So if you're ever looking for things that students are stumbling on, there are tons of resources online that can help you look to see what is happening. In fact, there's a group that's called AAAS. They did research. They have tested thousands and thousands of students to see what questions they have misconceptions about. So there are some research-based, banks of misconceptions online. So the next activity we are going to do is just as though there are the levels of the scope of what you're writing about. So if you're writing a question for how much time you expect the students to really be engaged in it, there's also the level of the thought behind the question. So with Wiggins, they also had, in Understanding by Design, they had the facets of understanding. And in the facets of understanding, there's different levels. And in your book on page 35, there's a really nice chart that goes through what each of those levels means. It's almost very comparable to the depths of knowledge, to the Bloom's taxonomy. And it talks about what the students will be doing. And then there's also some sample starter questions. So the sentence stems that you could drop some content or an idea into. What we're going to do is I have, or you have them on your tables, this is the blue set of paper. And there are different questions that you might ask students in your classroom. And then the white piece of paper is a grid with the different levels of questions, or the facets of understanding. And we're going to give you some time to sort them out and put the question where you think it lines up with the facet. So take the blue, use your chart on page 35, and think about where that question might fit in the facets of understanding. What questions do you have?